Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So with the Season of the Seraph kicking off here in the first week, we're already able to uncover some lore that has told us a whole lot more about the Witness, and in particular how it allows its failed servants to be punished. This is lore that relates to Eramis and the House of Salvation, and how they fared after Eramis failed to recover the relics of Nezarec at the end of the Season of the Plunder. Buckle in, ladies and gentlemen, because it's about to get gruesome. Our story today begins with our expeditions into the frozen wastes of Europa. In the Hierarchy mission, we're joined by Anna Bray and Osiris, and they give us some interesting dialogue on our first few interactions, and it's this that really starts to hint as to the nature of the punishments doled out to the House of Salvation and Eramis. This is something which, again, gets rather gruesome, but ultimately, this is all partly because of us as well. If we hadn't succeeded in the Season of the Plunder, the Witness would never have had to do this. This is the unfortunate side effect.
A cryptolith? It cannot be.
Xivu Arath's been avoiding Europa. Why move into Eramis's territory now?
Root them out, Guardian. Leave only their ashes.
So at a quick glance, that doesn't seem too bad. I mean, Xivu Arath's forces have finally moved into Eramis's turf. That doesn't seem like such a big deal, what with the forces of the Witness beginning to more closely coordinate with each other. However, the state of affairs becomes more apparent seconds later when we encounter one of Xivu Arath's nastier creations, a Wrathborn. The Wrathborn are an auxiliary fighting force that has been created by Xivu out of many races. We've thus far only faced Hive and Eliksni Wrathborn, but we know, thanks to the lore, that Cabal have also fallen under her sway in this manner. The interesting thing is that when you technically become a Wrathborn, it was noted back in the Season of the Hunt that you cease to be what you were, that you're no longer Eliksni, that you're no longer Hive, that you're no longer Cabal, you're something different, very much changed. And thus, it's kind of akin to death and rebirth. But you are ultimately a thrall to the will of the Hive God of War. A mindless husk that essentially serves Xivu Arath without question or delay. And the Wrathborn that we face in this mission is an Eliksni that is wearing the colours of the House of Salvation and was wielding the power of stasis. This seems like a small thing, but turning into a Wrathborn is not seen as a blessing or an honour, it's subjugation in the most direct of terms. And with the Wrathborn in question being a member of the House of Salvation, we can perhaps understand a little more as to why Xivu Arath's forces have arrived in Eramis's territory. They are here to enact a toll that needed to be paid after failure.
Wrathborn made from House Salvation stock. A gruesome fate. If they knelt to the Witness, this is a logical step.
I don't know.
Are Xivu and Eramis not allies working towards the same cause?
Of opportunity, maybe. Eramis doesn't strike me as the type to tolerate subjugation.
The observations of Osiris and Anna Bray are built further upon thanks to the intervention of Mara Sov. She contacts us in the first week's story via Hollow, and essentially tells us that she's been assigning her forces to keep an eye on us and the enemy. She provides a little further revelation, namely that Eramis has gone to ground, and that in her absence, the House of Salvation have essentially been press-ganged into further service at the Witness's command, and under the guiding hand of Xivu Arath. Take a listen.
With Nezarec out of play, our enemies pursue a killing stroke. Eramis has yet to resurface, but in her absence, agents of Xivu Arath swarm Europa. House Salvation seems to be assisting them in despoiling Clovis Bray's installations. While I've yet to discern an exact strategy, Anna and I agree they may be trying to wrest control of the Warmind's power on the Witness's behalf. I fear they're forging inroads for an invasion. Xivu Arath's forces mobilize within the Ascendant Plane. My scouts report her hive prepare to assault the Warmind's bunker on the moon. The submind that rests there is in danger. Shape this knowledge into deathly intent for our enemies, and the Warmind may yet be restored.
After this, Mara Sov accompanied us, as did the rest of the team, via radio, and we ventured to the Warmind bunker on the moon, seemingly looking for a sub-mind fragment of Malahayati, something that we would need in order to revive the Warmind and to prevent Xivu Arath and her forces from being able to access the Warsat network. However, there was something more concerning that we discovered down in that bunker, and again, it starts as something that might seem small. We found Scorn down there. Now, this, again, does not seem like a big deal, but it's actually a really big red flag, especially given some of the dialogue that Mara drops for us. Take a listen.
Scorn on the moon is a first. They shipping these in from Savathun's throne world?
No, these Scorn have not passed through the Ascendant Plane. They were exhumed locally.
You see, the word exhumed is to mean to dig up something, as in to dig up a body. A body is exhumed when it is dug out of its grave. This provides us with some context to things. It basically seems to tell us that these Scorn were recently made, and ultimately that means we need to ask the question of, made by who? Now, in the lore, the conventional answer to this is the fanatic Fikrul, the Baron from Forsaken and the Tangled Shore. He has long had the ability to resurrect Scorn, or merely to take dead fallen, and impart upon them the gift of undeath, turning them into Scorn. This is something that he originally obtained from Riven of a Thousand Voices with her wish magic, thanks to the intervention of a certain Uldren Sov, who prayed at his side as he was dying. He was then turned into a Scorn. Here's the interesting thing about that. We get no context as to how he's able to do this, and we have no context as to how that power originally manifested outside of wish magic. This is our answer to both these things, but it's worth remembering at this point that Riven has been corrupted and has been taken. She is a taken Ahamkara when this happens, and the powers of the Scorn have always been related to the powers of darkness. If it is to be seen that these bodies were exhumed recently, you would expect the Fanatic to be in tow, to be visible in the local area. But the Fanatic is not. The Fanatic is someone who has not been seen around Xivu Arath's forces at all, and I believe would have been, considering the fact that the Scorn are being used by entities such as Rulk when he was in the Throne World. This tells us that it wasn't necessarily the Fanatic that rezzed these Scorn. These Scorn were raised by the Witness, and that tells us some terrifying things because it means that Fallen had to die for this to happen. Which Fallen died? That's where our questioning goes next. Unfortunately, the answer to that is exactly what you're thinking. Yes, it is most definitely the case that these Scorn appear to have been created out of the House of Salvation. The Scorn have always been tools that the Witness can use in order to commune with those that it considers to be its disciples, as Callus proved on the Glycan, but are also capable of being used as frontline combatants. It is, however, always the case that the Scorn have to be made from the dead, and this, unfortunately, seems to be exactly what has happened to the House of Salvation. In the final room where we actually make contact with Malahayati, we see our final piece of evidence of this fact. Pyrrhus, a Scorn that has been created as a tether between the submind Malahayati and Xivu Arath's forces that are attempting to corrupt it. This is a moment after the fight where Mara gives us the ultimate context as to what's happening with the Wrathborn and the House of Salvation and the Scorn.
That's Scorn. Her armor. She served as captain, a marksman under Aramis.
Risen as a nexus of Xivu's control here, to exert her will on the submind. If that's what it was doing.
To defile Aramis's house. This is not an act of desperation. It is punishment, nevertheless. This victory will disrupt Xivu Arath's hold over the Scorn on Luna.
At least for a while. I've got Mala's core packed. Exfil incoming.
Go. I still hold questions that require answers. Time will tell what they are.
So now we can understand a little more about the nature of the consequences for failure if you're serving in the Witness's ranks. The Scorn are just another example of something similar to what has been done before. Just like the Taken, just like the Wrathborn, the Scorn are a mindless army that can be commanded to do the Witness's bidding without hesitation. It is a gruesome fate that has been publicly conducted upon the forces of the House of Salvation to reinforce their sense of loyalty through fear. This is the fate that the Witness would see done to the universe. Subservience to its vision is the only state of being that it will tolerate, either insightfully, as was the case with Rolk, in the style of a sycophant, as is the case with Callus, or mindlessly, as is the case with these poor Scorn and Wrathborn that have been made out of the House of Salvation. Now, when it comes to the knock-on effects of this punishment, I think there are two sides that you need to look at it from. The only side that I think is clear-cut, and that we don't need to examine further, is that of the Witness's other forces. Xivu Arath and Callus will see this as a worthy punishment, and will follow it to the letter. Their perspective is uncomplicated. Our perspective, or rather the perspective of some of those in our inner circle, and the perspective of Eramis, are the ones that I think should be examined. You see, Eramis has always been one to look out for her people. We may disagree as to the methods by which that's best done, but ultimately, Eramis does look out for the people under her watch. She has been always concerned with the future of the Eliksni, and does believe that she can craft a better home for them as time progresses. This is the reason why she rebuilt the Eliksni military-industrial complex at Rhys Reborn, and why she rebuilt the entirety of that city itself. She did not build a house out of purely a desire to plunder, she built a house out of a desire to create a home. The Witness offered her power in order to achieve that end. But this is not to say that the Witness is necessarily on her side as far as those endeavors are concerned, and this is starting to show it. The Witness and her might now be considered necessarily as enemies. Eramis might go rogue if this continues. To do something like this to her people directly transgresses against her beliefs as to what the future should hold for the Eliksni. But it's not as complicated as Eramis turning tail and opposing those that she previously stood with. She acknowledges at the end of the Season of the Plunder that there is perhaps a future for the Eliksni within Eido's vision of the future, one which respects the Eliksni ways of old, and yet also forges new customs for them based on the circumstances of their survival. But she has also accepted that she does not have a part in that future, and so I see it as very unlikely that she would willingly turn to us without some kind of grand olive branch being extended. She is very much hesitant to work on our side, but I would say, without a question, that she is willing to change if behavior like this continues from the Witness. She will not stand idly by and watch her people be turned into monsters, and that is something that will keep her fighting, that is certain. The other perspective that's worth thinking about is the one of those at our side. It is worth remembering the fact that one who was once subservient to the Witness sits in our innermost council. Clovis Bray watches over the advance of the Wrathborn, and in spite of seeing the nature of how the Witness punishes those that trespass against it, he seems unfazed. It's worth remembering that the Wrathborn were originally after Clovis Bray in the original mission of this season, the Hierarchy mission. It's, however, strange that he seems so foolhardy to willingly take them on. Take a listen to this little excerpt where he makes commentary on the Wrathborn.
Guardian, Xivu Arath's oversight of House Salvation is troubling. Her Wrathborn will not be uprooted by strength alone.
No? Perhaps you just aren't strong enough.
She commands a great deal of power, Clovis. Any attempt to strike directly at her would only add to that power.
Preposterous. Rituals, magic, and superstition. Even your light can be quantified and controlled. These fairy tales don't scare me.
You will learn soon enough.
It's not the last time that I'll say it in this season, but keep an eye on Clovis Bray. I don't trust him, I don't think anyone should. The likelihood that he turns tail and runs on the promise of a golden age for humanity under his command seems very high, it seems exceptionally likely. But that's all from me for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, go ahead and hit the like button, And of course, remember to hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications for more Destiny content leading up to Lightfall. Of course, if you have your own thoughts, leave them down below in the comments section. In particular, let me know what you think Aramis's reaction to this is going to be. Do you think that she's gone to ground as a means of hiding from this? Do you think that it's shame? Do you think that she's actually within the thrall of the Witness and that she is having punishment done to her as well? What's going on here? What's your perspective? What do you think's going on? I've not looked through all of the lore, but I do believe there's questions as to whether Eido and Aramis are still communicating, which would indicate that there is a fair degree of independence in Aramis still, but I'd need to double check all of that, and that's literally just me remembering from the skim reading that I've done of the lore so far, so don't count that as gospel. All that aside though, as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Pur audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.